So welcome back after taking your break. Let's now continue building the About section. And so this was where we took off after the last lecture. So what we have here, again, is these two headings, and I'm going to call them tertiary headings. So the third level of a heading, which means H3 in practice. And then this here is just going to be some paragraph, okay? So this is some very simple styles. So let's now very quickly implement them. But once again, before we start with our markup here. So we're inside of this column here. So we can actually right now start writing our H3 here. So again, I'm going to use Emmet, and I hope that you're already using it as well. So H3, and now heading tertiary. And the text goes like, you're going to fall in love with nature. And then after that, we have a paragraph element, which I'm simply going to call paragraph. So hit tab and then some text here. Okay. Now, if you're using Emmet already, then you can simply write lorem to get some blind text. So some text that is just like a filler text. So you write lorem and then you hit tab, and then this weird looking text here appears like in Latin or something. You could also go to a generator like this one, lorem ipsum generator, and then get some text from down here. You can even generate more paragraphs or sentences or words or whatever. So if you need some blind text, you can use a tool like that, or just use Emmet. Now, it's actually not the best practice to use blind text when we build web pages. It's always best to work with the final content that's going to be on the site. But in case we don't have that, then it's okay to just use blind text, okay? And so now I'm copying this because we have two headers. And the second one says, live adventures like you never have before. So let me try it. And now it's no longer working. Well, why is that? It's probably because it's already written in here. Let me delete it just to... Yeah, it's true. And so actually you see that the text that it wrote here now is a bit different than what we have here, right? So it looks better on the final web page if the text isn't exactly the same. And so, as we were discussing in the last lecture, these are very simple styles concerning the typography of our website. So we're not really calling them components or anything. They are just typography styles. And so heading, tertiary, as well as paragraph are going here to our typography file. All right, and also the paragraph. Now this is not going to be anything really fancy here. All we want to do is to set some font size, like 1.6 rem, and maybe a font weight here as well. So let's say 700, so to make it a bit bolder. And then, such as our other headings, let's also transform it to uppercase. So text transform uppercase. All right, and as for the paragraph, let me set the font size to 1.6 as well. 1.6 rem. And now what I also want, I want the paragraphs to have a margin at the bottom. And that's because we usually use a bunch of different paragraphs, one after the other. And so it makes sense to have a bit of space between them. But we don't want any space between the last one. And do you remember how we did that? And that's right, we used the not pseudo class again. So just like this. Not, and then last child. And so we're selecting everything except the last child. So the opposite of last child. Last child is it's just the last one, but not last child is everything except the last child. And so let's give it some margin at the bottom of 30 pixels. So 3 rem. So let's check this out now. All right. This looks actually pretty good already. Let's just take a look. And actually, so yeah, this has the margin at the bottom, but this one does not because it's the last child. And so therefore, our rule that we applied before does work indeed. Now, one last thing we can do here with this text is to set some margin in here. Now I want you to keep in mind what we did with this heading here. So we used the helper class to set this margin that you see here. Remember this 80 pixels, this 8 rem here, right? And that's because of reusability. We want to reuse this throughout the page. And the same thing might be true for this H3 element here, of course. And so let's now do the exact same thing. So we want to reuse it, and so we're simply going to add a utility class, because we might want some of these headings with space, but others without space. And so a utility class is the way to go here. Sorry, I didn't intend to just delete that. And we want to add it here as well as here, right? And so I can use the trick that I showed you earlier with the multiple cursors. So here and now I hit Command or Control probably on Windows. And now I have 2 cursors and I can write the same thing in 2 places. So U margin bottom 2. So I'm going with 20 pixels here. And you know what would be actually better here? Instead of having these numbers, it would be having some designations, so some names. Because right now we're actually hard coding the margin in here. So this would basically be the same as having an inline style and set the margin directly in here, right? So what's really the point of having it like this here with this name already saying that it's 2, if we could just set the inline style to 2 rem, right? So let me just delete this here and call it small, and in here call it big. Okay, so this one is big, and now we want one that is small, and maybe even one that is called medium or something. So small and one called medium, let's say. So let's make it 2 and this one 4. Maybe we can use it later at some point. And now it makes sense to have the utility classes like that, because then if we later want to change this margin bottom actually to like 4 or 1.5 or something like that, then the name still makes sense that we have here in our markup. Okay, so let's check it out. And yeah, okay. And actually I think it's a bit too much, so let's change it to 1.5. And so now imagine we would have to go back and then change it here to what? To 1.5 or 1-5. That would be weird, okay? So it's better like this. So let's hope it updates. Did not update. Well, why is that? Inspect. And yeah, actually it did. Okay, so 1.5 rem now. And actually, since we're looking here at the rem, there's something I want to show you. So remember all the talk that we had about the way that units are processed in CSS, right? And we talked about declared values and cascaded values and used values and computed values and all of that stuff, right? And actually what this DevTools here allows you to do is to see the computed values. And so in here we have, for example, 1.5 rem, and then we have all the computed values. For example, we see the 16 pixels that we have. We see that all of these are set to 0. Remember that I was telling you that all of these elements, they have to have some value, right? So the padding has a value, all of 0, the margin has values, all of 0, except this one, which is 15. And then all of these properties here, they have values. And if we hit show all here, then we can actually see all of the CSS properties and all with all of their values. So if you remember that lecture, these values, they are either the inherited values or the default values, right? Okay, so we saw that we have here this 15 pixels, which came exactly from this 1.5 rem. So everything is working just as expected. Okay, so let's now take care of this button that we have here, okay? And I'm also now seeing that this text here is a bit smaller, and actually it looks a bit nicer that way here, right? So let's cut a bit of the other text, and then of course focus on this button here. So you see that when we hover the button, from the green underline it becomes a green background, and you see the subtle shadow here, and then when we hit it, it goes down. So this is basically the same mechanism as here. When we hit it, it goes up a little bit, and then we click it, it looks like it moves away from the user. So basically as if we were really physically clicking the button, okay? Like hitting the button with our hand. And that's the same impression that I wanted to create here. Okay, so as we were saying, let's take away some of this text. Well, maybe not this much. Let's just finish somewhere here, okay. Yeah, looks better. Maybe one more word or two, and okay. So this button will be an anchor. So I just write a.button text. Hit tab, and that's it. Oh, and actually it also asks me here to complete the href. Okay. So I just pointed to nowhere. So that's why I'm using this hash symbol here. And if I now hit tab, you see that it will then come to this point here next, because there's already this gray cursor here. So I hit tab again, and now I'm here, and then, okay, and then I'm here. And so you see this Emmet extension, it's really, really helpful. For example, if I just write img, then it will automatically put these attributes here for me and let me cycle through them. So now I write something here, let's say ABC, and if I now hit tab, it will go to the next place where I can write some text. So text, and if I hit tab again, it goes to the end. Okay, so the text in here should be learn more. And then we have this arrow going on, and that is a HTML special character or a special symbol. And in HTML, we write them like that. So the ampersand and then a special code. So in this case, RARR. And that will translate into this arrow. Let's take a look. And yeah, so this is the arrow that I was telling you about. Now for a complete list of these, they are actually on my resources page. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. So let me just open it to you here. codingheroes.io/resources. All right, and then so here is this HTML entity reference by CSS-Tricks. And so in here you have all these codes for these special symbols if you want to use them. But what I want to show you is this arrow, and I think it's somewhere down there. Let me see. Well, you have all these Greek letters going on here, some more Greek letters, and well, it should be somewhere here. Okay, so here are the errors. And I really like to use these instead of using other icons, like coming from an icon font. So it's just easier to use this HTML code, okay? So if you don't know about this resource page, I have a bunch of resources here and I update it sometimes, and you can subscribe if you want to receive these updates, but of course you don't have to, okay? So let's close this again. And now we are ready to style this link. So we already have a file for a button component. So I say that we can simply add this smaller button here to this button component file as well, okay? So button text, and then we can put our styles here. So we will have some styles for the links and visited, and of course hover and active pseudo classes. So link, and by now you're already really familiar with the way we write this. So link and visited. And then we have one for the hover state. And then we have one for the active state. And this is actually pretty similar to the button that we wrote before. So let's just very quickly do this, okay? So the color should be our primary green color, okay? So that it stands out nicely from the rest of the text. So our green color, we are going to display it as an inline block as always, so that we can use the box model properties on it, like padding, margin, and all that good stuff. So inline block. Then we want to get rid of the underlining. So text decoration, none, because we want to put our own decoration, so our own underlining. And we do that by having a border button. And it will be 1 pixel, solid, and again, the primary color. So the exact same color as the text. And we do that because this way we can set a padding between the text and the line, which otherwise we could not. So padding 3 pixels. And again, 3 pixels like this and 1 pixel is so small that it's not really going to change sizes if the user decides to change the base font size. And so if everything on the page scales up, 1 pixel will still be 1 pixel. Because in order to become 2 pixels, the user would have to change the base font size from 16 to 32, so to double it. And that's a bit extreme, so I mean, no one is going to do that. The same applies here to this padding. So if it's a really small unit, we can just leave it like that. All right, and now about the hover, remember how it looked like. I can actually show it to you again. Well, sometimes it doesn't really reload. I'm not sure why. And actually nothing's happening. Let me take a look why. So button text is the class of this. And button text is what I have here. So why is this not working? Oh, I see. I have an error here. So a small typo. Let's save it and take a look again. Oh yeah, so here we have it. Oh, also we forgot to style the size of this. So let's do that as well. And then remember that the hover effect is like this moves up a bit, has this shadow, and when we click, it moves down. So first things first, the font size should be like the text 1.6. And then let's take care of the hover effect. Now actually this 1.6 rem font size number here is coming up an awful lot of times. And so I think it's actually best to replace this with a variable. So if one day we want to change this 16 pixel like default font size that we have here on the page, we can simply do that by changing one variable. So let's do that. And let's say font sizes, or just font. And so default font size. And I'm simply calling it default font size because that's the font size we're like using all over the place. We use it in the paragraphs, in this button text, in the H3. We used it, I think, in the primary button as well. And so let's do a variable with that. Now, please don't confuse that with, where do we have it? Well, it's not here. I know. So please don't confuse it with this 62.5%. Okay, so we already talked about this. This is just a definition to define what 1 rem is, right? So all we're doing here in this variables file now is to say basically that we're using 1.6 rem all the time, and so we're using a variable for that. So I know that we use it here in the heading tertiary exactly, and down there as well. So default font size here and here. So let's save it here in the typography. And the utilities, I can close it. The main, I can also close it for now. And so here in the button, we also used it. And if I remember it right, we did it here as well. So yeah, font size here in the primary button is 1.6 as well. So everything is 1.6 now. So that is our version. Imagine that we have a client, for example, for which we are building the site. So you have all your site nicely set up and you're going to the client to show it to him. And he says, well, this text is way too small. I want it bigger. So what are you going to do? What do you prefer to do? Do you prefer to go to all of this code here and change font size manually to 1.8, for example, 1.8, all over the place? In the button, and the other typography styles that we saw? Or do you prefer to simply come here and change one number to 1.8 and everything changes? And you see, everything changes and the client is happy and everything is easier for you. So you just saved a lot of time and the client is happy and so everyone is happy. So you see, variables, we should use them whenever we can, okay? And you can probably argue that I could use even more variables all over the place here, but I also don't want to make it too much here, okay? I want to keep it at a reasonable level. All right, anyway, let's not change this hover style. So background color, you saw it was this green as well. So default, actually color, primary, the text changed to white, so color white. And we have some box shadow going on. Remember, it's 0 in the X direction, 10 pixels or 1 rem in the Y direction. Let's put 2 rem for the blur, and then the color RGBA, color black. And you're already used to writing this. I'm going with 15% here. So please feel free to play around with all these numbers to get a better feeling for them and to see what looks best. I just don't want to lose a lot of time by doing that now in here, because otherwise we end up with a course with 50 hours and that's way too much. But again, please play around with these values. Okay, and finally, I'm translating the button in the Y direction for 2 pixels, so minus 2 pixels actually. So we're going to move it up as we discussed earlier. Okay, so and since we want this to be animated, all of it, let's add the transition property here. Transition all 0.2 seconds. All right, and finally for the active, we want the box shadow. Let's actually copy this. So the box shadow of 0.5 rem, and then here just 1. And to translate it, we can actually move it back to its initial position, so 0. So let's take a look. Can close this. Well, something's not working here, at least not with the hover. Let me see where that's happening. Ah, all right. Maybe you spotted it already, but somehow I did not. And so yeah, now it's working just fine. You see? Check. Okay, and now with this part gone, with everything working as expected, you should probably take another break so that this video doesn't become a 1 hour long video or something. So see you in a second, where we will finally finish with this image composition here.